That's right. All right. What's up, everybody? Sorry, we had just a little snafu there. We thought we started on YouTube, but it didn't. So we started the stream internally. We started talking, whatever. I don't know. Anyway, we're doing it for real this time. Background audio is not in play, but the YouTube, let's see, we're live on YouTube. And let's go to this view. We've got the folks from the Pacific Northwest meetup. We've got Tony Seats and Emmett Armstrong. And we've also got Zach Bujazia in the background here. Let me see if I can bring the three of them up. We've also got a bunch of folks popping into the Twitter space. They might have been with us while we just realized we were not live on YouTube, but we're going to bring in those folks to chat with us throughout the stream. So if you'd like to join the conversation at any time, that's the way to do it. We're going to jump in. Let's see, we've got kind of a few different things for y'all today. We've got a live Fig Jam board in the background. So in the YouTube description, you can see there's a Fig Jam board. There's a link to a Twitter Spaces. And then what's the other one? Oh, what's the other one? I don't know. There's three links. I forget what one of them is, but it's the Fig Jam link, the Twitter Spaces, and I think there's something else, but I can't remember exactly what it is. Anyway, so that's how you can get involved. You can get involved through voice. You can join the live chat, which we'll bring up onto the screen here shortly, but we can see that we've got some folks in there. What's up? Andreas, Maggie, hello. Arthur's in the house. Steve Sutterman, Dale Jensen, Lacey Kessler's in the house. Hello, hello. So be sure to join the chat. We're going to get interactive and have a conversation all about artificial intelligence and its impact on the world of web design. Artificial intelligence has kind of been a topic, a trending topic over the last few months, especially with the release of ChatGPT. And there's lots of talk about how this is going to replace jobs and this, that, the other. And we want to talk about how does that relate to web design, right? What does this mean? We were looking at this, like Wix has this artificial intelligence page builder that we're going to look at here in a second. Why is it? Okay. So my whole soundboard is kind of giving me fits, just FYI, if anything else goes crazy. Okay, so, Wix is announcing tools like this. I'm sure internally somewhere inside of Webflow, somebody said, hey, what about AI? And, it's just the talk of the town right now. So we wanted to have a conversation. But before we do that, we're going to talk a little bit about some recent Webflow meetups. The folks in the Pacific Northwest, we got Emmett and Tony here. So Tony, you were telling us a little bit about this meetup. Do you want to jump back into that now that we've actually got the audio on the YouTube ready?
Yeah. Now that I've got a little practice.
Right.
So yeah, more or less, Emmett, myself, and Kevin Watkins of Farewell Media hosted the inaugural Webflow PNW meetup this last weekend. We did like one primary event day on Saturday, and then like a low-key kind of hang and drinks and pub and grub type deal on Friday evening, just to kind of introduce everybody and make sure everybody was going to be comfortable the next day. That happened to work out really well. But yeah, we had about 12 to 15 people, and kind of our aim was just to get as many people in the Pacific Northwest together to talk like Webflow and anything related to Webflow and kind of like life, and just really get the ball rolling kind of on this space. And we had a total blast. It's a real good time.
Yeah, and this is the first time you guys did a meetup like this, right?
Yes, this is numero uno.
And what sparked it, Colleen? What were you going to say?
I was just going to say, and I'd add to this. This wasn't just a 1 hour happy hour meetup. You guys did a 2-day event. That is coming out of the gate swinging. So hats off to that.
Thank you.
Really cool.
Yeah.
It was a blast.
Emmett, any other thoughts? And if you're just joining us on the Twitter space, if you want to jump over to YouTube to see, we're looking at some of the pictures from the event here. Emmett, any other thoughts on why'd you guys do this? What was the reasoning? Will you do it again?
Sure. Yeah, well, we all met. I think Tony and I had interacted on Twitter, but we finally all met in person at the Webflow conference in November. And we just said, oh, we got to get together. Let's hang out. So Tony and I think, connected first. We just did a call, and then we said, seriously, let's do an actual meetup. So we looped in Kevin, and Kevin volunteered his space. We got all the, he rented some chairs and got some pastries and all that. I think we met maybe 3 or 4 times to plan, but our goal was to keep it simple. So we each just presented, maybe about an hour, and then we had Q&A at the end of the day. So overall, very chill. Colleen, you're too kind to call it a 2-day event. It was really it was a dinner, and then we each presented for about an hour, and then kind of facilitated stuff. But other than that, I think that was a great way to do it. We didn't really take on more than we could chew. I think it went just as smoothly as it could.
Nice. Yeah, and I think the reason we want to highlight this, and we also have Zach, who's going to talk a little bit about the upcoming Vegas Webflow meetup. The reason we want to talk about meetups, and the reason why we're, Colleen and I are super bullish on meetups, is that they just offer so much opportunity for real connections. Everything. We're going to talk a lot about the digital world we're living in, and how this AI is evolving, and how these technologies are just kind of everywhere. It's becoming more and more important for the human element to kind of like shine throughout all of this. And so I think that's what these meetups do. That's where they bring people together, things together. Like this is where the real collisions and opportunities kind of happen. So anyway, there's lots of meetups coming up. There's lots of events coming up in the Webflow community. So we wanted to like kind of take a look through those, and then we're going to run through these. Any other thoughts, Emmett and Tony, before we kind of change gears and run through some of the rest of these?
Not really. I mean, you hit the nail on the head there. I think like those kind of connections that happen in real life are a little bit different than what happens online. It's one thing to see somebody kind of in the Twitter space or see their work online, but to get to meet people in real life, you start to make connections and like learn their personal story that you might not otherwise know, and you build these bonds that you carry with you for quite a while. From Webflow Conf, I mean, even to meeting up again in Bend, I was able to hang out with Emmett and Kevin and several other people that were in attendance at Webflow Conf, which is a pretty darn cool thing.
Yeah, and Emmett and Tony were also at State of Flow. Are any of you guys going to Creative South? Emmett, I think maybe you are.
Yeah, I am.
Yeah.
Yep.
So we're going to talk about Creative South a little bit. We're going to be doing a Webflow meetup at Creative South. By the way, we've talked to the organizing team there. There will be an official Webflow meetup, like a community organized event at Creative South. So that's going to be a lot of fun. And Zach, do you want to tell us a little bit about, you got a Vegas kind of event upcoming and a cool little video, actually. Let's take a look at that while you chat about it.
Yeah, we just scheduled our 5th meetup, which is pretty exciting and for us to have. We were looking at the date, and it's going to be Friday, March 3rd. And that's like exactly 3 years since our first meetup that we held here in Vegas. So we kicked off our meetup right in the timely year of 2020, right before everything locked down. And, started out, had no idea what this meetup would lead to and what it would bring, but we have such a cool community here in Vegas, and we're hosting it at this new location right on the Strip. It's a rooftop deck, looks out over the Strip. We got some games and activities and some limited swag for the meetup that we got planned. So it's going to be a fun time, and invite anyone in the area to come out and travel into Vegas. Flights, hotels, super cheap. Good time to book a trip, personal, or get your company to sponsor it. Nice. And hang out with us.
Yeah, I've been out to a meetup in Vegas with Zach. We hung out there a little while, and it's always a lot of fun. That city is crazy. They've always got a good way for finding interesting ways to keep people entertained. Maybe afterwards, even taking, what's that little spot you took me, the little sneaky tiki or whatever it was.
The golden tiki bar.
That's right. All right, what's up? So we got Josh Lowe joining us in the background, actually. Hey, what's up, Josh?
Hey.
I saw you posted there was no chat, but now it's in there. So
nice.
All right, so lots of events on the State of Flow website. We're going to get into it. I think we're deep enough into the stream here. The Reloom Design League semifinals were yesterday.
What?
That was a lot of fun.
That was awesome.
Actually, Josh, do you want to give us a little, while you're here, you want to give us a little snapshot while we maybe look?
Yeah.
I'll just skim through the video. You can give us just a little overview.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, we were graced with Raymmar's presence as a co-host with me, and it was the battle of the ages. Joseph Barry, Nicola Miranda, both award-winning designers. And basically, if you haven't heard of RDL, it is a a quick 30-minute face off on Figma, and this theme here is healthy beverage. So we just hooked them up with all the fun, cool design assets, and we got to see Joseph Barry struggle. That was like, it was like watching a god bleed, you know. But it was good. It was really close, and yeah, it was just fun times, good conversations, digging into like, you know, technical design conversations, and just having a good time. So yeah, it's always good to have Raymmar with you. And it is totally random, but I just got to give you some gratitude, or I got to show gratitude to you, Raymmar. Like, you are amazing. I just really appreciate you. You're great friend, and love what you're doing even with this. So yeah, just want to show some love. That's all.
Appreciate you, Josh. And if you haven't watched, this Reloom Design League is a killer experience to just kind of dive in deep inside the minds of these really talented web designers and get to see them, you know, kind of struggle through the creative process in real time. And so that's a blast. Tomorrow you have another challenge coming up, right? The semifinals continue.
Thursday
Thursday
is Grace Walker and Dan Mall, which is just, we're so grateful to have such a champ like Dan. And yeah, so we're in the middle of the tournament semifinals, and yeah, we'll continue until early March. We'll wrap it up.
Right on. Okay, and again, you can go and check out all of those links that we're talking about on the State of Flow website. On the right side, there's the upcoming links, and in the middle, there's kind of news and stuff, and we will explain more and more about how this is coming to life as a community dashboard as we go. But I want to get into the topic at hand, which is all about, and let's unhighlight Josh there. We're bringing the rest of the crew as a 4-piece. And again, okay, if you're on Twitter Spaces, you can request to speak if you've got thoughts, if you've got something to share, if you've got anything you'd like to chime in. We've got a few folks hanging out in the Twitter Spaces. We've also got the backstage. Those links are all in the YouTube description if you'd like to join as the conversation gets going. But let's jump into this topic at hand, because, you know, we talked about, you know, AI, the conversations are abounding, right? There's lots of different things. We even asked an AI, is it worth learning Webflow? And it was overwhelmingly yes. You know, so it talks about learning Webflow can be worth it if you're interested in creating responsive websites without having to write code. Okay, great. Webflow offers a variety of templates and tools. Okay, great. That being said, if you're interested in becoming a professional web developer, it's still important to learn HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, which we all know because Webflow is really just a visual abstraction of all of those tools. And so the question we have here, and this is ultimately whether learning Webflow is worth it, depends on your goals and priorities. If you want to create websites quickly and easily without coding, then Webflow can be a great tool for you. If you want to become a professional web developer, then learning Webflow can be a useful addition to your skill set. So that's what ChatGPT has to say about this. I'd be interested if anybody disagrees with that right off the bat. Anybody have thoughts about ChatGPT's answer about whether Webflow is worth it or not?
It's missing the meme that we love of the door-to-door.
Yeah. Josh Fry's infamous meme that I stole. Yeah. And then, you know, so like, okay, so ChatGPT says, of course, and that's like a really rational answer. That's like, you know, the AI not really telling you that it's coming for your job, right? And I don't know if the AI is like capable of saying, yeah, but I'm going to come and get it, you know, from you eventually. And so then you see Wix, right? So Wix has a artificial design, what do they call it? Design intelligence. So Wix has this like tool that we'll just let this play in the background that they're, you know, using and testing and playing with. And this was launched like towards the middle of last year. So this isn't even like, hey, this just came out. This has been out there for a while. I don't know how effective this is. I tried to jump into my Wix account, and there's a couple steps before you can kind of start using this. And so I didn't get a demo ready to kind of like jump in and show you. But again, I also have to think Webflow is behind the scenes thinking about how can they plug some of this technology into their tool, right? Like somebody at Webflow has to have shot up a hand and said, hey, are we doing anything about this AI thing? And so I imagine at some point this tech is going to sneak in, and you hear more and more about some of these other tools that help you build and design. Maggie asked earlier in the beginning of the stream, she asked, the thumbnail looks cool. Where do you get the art for it? It's all Midjourney, right? So if we look inside of here, this web design robot's coming. Let me cover some of this other stuff up. Y'all can't get sneak peeks at that. Okay, so web design robots coming. Like this was the AI, you know, put some little Webflow eyes in here, and I just slapped a couple layers on. But yeah, this is all Midjourney. So if we pull up, you know, my Discord, I'm literally experimenting with different, things, and this is how I do it now, right? If you look back at all the State of Flow thumbnails, they're all kind of using that same tactic right now. And so I don't know what say you, and let's take it to the crowd right off the bat. I mean, Wix is already playing on this. I imagine it's coming. There's a ton of articles, so we linked to a couple articles. What do you think? Like, let's get some initial thoughts from the crowd here. If you're watching, leave your thoughts in the comments. We'll be pulling those in. And also, if you'd like to share your thoughts on the Twitter space, you can join the conversation that way.
I'd be curious if anybody was at last Friday's Build and Bond. So on Fridays, were you there, Josh? Or you were there, Emmett? So
That was the one that Nelson did.
Yeah, so the one that Nelson did. So last week, the Build and Bond had to do with AI. I wasn't able to make it, so curious maybe what, that was a Webflow event. What came out of that? I noticed the Webflow stream that happened last Wednesday. Aaron Kornblatt was bringing in ChatGPT a little bit into that stream. So I mean, that to me is a sign that there are some conversations that are going on. So
Right.
Emmett, Josh, what tools or what things did you potentially learn about web design and AI?
Nelson showed us a bunch of cool tools to make, fake voices. So there's some cool stuff there. I don't think we really touched on anything besides some of the Figma plugins that have already been announced. You type in what you need and it spits out an image. I think it's stuff that I had seen before, certainly. And we were mostly just sharing the tools that we had thought about or we had seen.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, if anybody wants to share a tool specifically that they're using, I'd be interested to know what other tools people are using in the web design process. Obviously, some image generation stuff. I know lots of people are using like copy tools to get the copy for their website. There was that team that we had on a little while back that was doing an AI specifically for Webflow. And so it was like a native Webflow AI that's actually like available inside of the designer to kind of spit out copy. Like there's stuff kind of popping up all around here. And I'm just wondering, like, and this is a comment here. Let's see, these AI tools will be assistive tools for at least the next 10 to 15 years. Does everybody agree with that? Do you think that's...
I don't know that I agree on the 10 to 15 part.
It seems like a lot of time, right?
I think it'll be a shorter time frame.
I think they're always going to be assistive to a certain degree. So, like with the AI stuff, I mean, we've kind of seen technology and tools come into play with a lot of things, and like digital cameras and digital photography. And yeah, maybe it like wiped out an industry of people developing photos, but there was always the skill and the talent there needed for photography, and it just kind of adapted, and it brought in new jobs that we may see things go away, things that we're used to, but we don't see what it's going to bring. So like if you think about how the internet changed things with like a travel agent, there was a day where you had to call someone to book your trips and book your flights for you, and now you can handle all of that. But what came from that is travel influencers and travel vlogging stuff, we didn't maybe anticipate with the internet. And I think the same is going to be with all these AI tools. I think our skill as web designers and developers and everything is not necessarily the product we're creating, but it's our skill and our time that we devote to learning these things and how to get the most out of them and extract kind of the best. So I see these AI tools as something we're going to learn and we're going to master more than the average person. And that's truly going to be what we offer,
Yeah, I'll add to that. I heard, who was it? Gary V. He said this. He said with AI, all it does, it takes care of the execution. So then the next step is for us is more of the expression and the ideas that's going to rise to the top, as opposed to the person that can execute faster to the top. So that's the same with like all technology. It's kind of another analogy is like before mass manufacturing of clothing, you would just create your own clothes and now just take some time. But now with this new technology, it opens up a whole industry of like fashion. Like before that, fashion never existed. So It's going to be like how we as the individual choose the way we express ourselves, like through our clothes, as opposed to just like, just doing it the old simple way. Same with like tool making or like mass industrialized manufacturing of tools. We're no longer just valued as like a tool maker, but now like what do we then use the tools for? Like what are the ideas? So I think those who have really good ideas will rise to the top with this new technology.
Mm-hmm. So in the end, I think it's leaning on what both of you guys said, like the output's only as good as the input, right? And I kind of gave a little demonstration of like using AI to write some JavaScript and like interpret and add some additional rules to CSS custom code at the Webflow PNW meetup for my presentation. And kind of as I think the audience could see is like the outputs of that environment are only as good as like what I would feed it. My misspellings, et cetera, included. But a lot of those things were like, you still have to understand the context and like the greater aim of like what it is that you're trying to do with the tool. And those things I think they'll get better over time. Like as tools like ChatGPT are able to handle bigger inputs, say like giant code repositories and things like that, they can kind of learn your environment and then better understand the cues that they're given.
Yeah.
Output's only as good as the input right now.
Yeah, and I think that's the key. And I mean, going back to the, what was the comment there about assistive, being assistive for the next few years? Mike was saying, about this being assistive. I think that's right to a certain extent. But even like Josh, what you were saying, I think it was Josh that was saying it. The ideas, it's about having the good ideas. I think also being able to like come up with those ideas. So for instance, the other day I was using ChatGPT to come up with like topics for an idea that I had. I was like, hey, it was a crypto meetup. I'm doing some, community work for a crypto startup. And we're like, okay, we need a name for a meetup. And I was like, give me 5 name suggestions for, this type of meetup topic, around these couple topics. And it just spit out, some great names. And I was like, okay, we ran with one of them. And so I think, like Josh, even to your point, like the ideas will be expanded upon by this tool. I like the analogy of sketching, right? Like using it as a sketch tool, especially in this certain state where it's like a lot of times getting those rough iterations out, like when you're spitballing ideas, when you're coming up with a bunch of different ideas, sometimes to have something that can like help you speed up that process, is super effective, or give you ideas from a perspective that has other inputs than you do. Really broadens the scope. It's almost like having a focus group, but it's like your personalized focus group. And I think that's where the real value is in those like, opportunities to kind of use it like your sketch pad, like your rough ideation. And then you can take those, refine them into something nicer, turn them into a little whatever, embellish them. And I bet that's how the web design stuff is going to play out. But Josh, even with Reloom, right? Like, I mean, imagine spitting your stuff in. Like, you guys are probably thinking about it, right?
Yeah, even like the next iteration of RDL, maybe instead of people just designing like from scratch, they can just use AI tools to like, imagine all the thoughts that they have in their head on the canvas. So that's a whole other thing. But yeah, definitely the guys are playing with some AI tools. You might see something down the pipeline. But that's all I'll say.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's a heck of a tease, right? It's like we may or may not be. You sound like the CIA. We may or may not be playing with artificial intelligence. I'm just writing a little prompt here. And I join the conversation. I don't know how to do this. How am I supposed to like get this? There it goes. I'm like, doggone it, stop being difficult, Figma. Join the conversation. If you're watching, there is a link in the description of the YouTube video if you'd like to jump in the backstage with Josh and Tony. Where's Aiva? We usually have Aiva in the background.
He messaged me shortly before he wasn't able to make it today, so he sends his regrets.
You know what? He's fired. We're gonna have to cut his pay. Okay, Arthur's saying, I think being a designer isn't going to go away. It will just change. If you resist AI, you'll get left behind. It's just a tool. I think that's right. We have somebody requesting on Twitter Spaces here. Let's see what Shane G has to say. You're on, Shane. What's up?
Hey, you let me in. Sweet. Yeah, a couple of thoughts on all this. I'm really interested to see where AI goes with like SEO. Like Google just released some guidance on like best practices and how to use. Basically, they've come out and said use it as assistive, like you guys have talked about. But I'm interested. I think like overall, AI is just going to raise the bar, kind of like we've already said. Like the whole Wix thing. I feel like they're just going to like everyone will be able to get in and make something really cool. But I'm curious to see, and that will push like the really good people even higher, or they'll be forced to keep up. But I'm curious to see like the bias because essentially like AI is limited to inputs right now, and so like where does the creative process actually take us long term if it's only limited by what we can give it and feed it? Like it's only going to recreate based off what we've given it. So like will it end up like leaning one way? For like example, like in design, is it going to lean one way? Not that that looks like a bad thing, but is it going to be limited by what we can give it? It's interesting because like Chat GPT, for example, as well, is I believe Chat GPT 4 is going to have like 400 times the amount of input when it's released, or sorry, data points. So like I'm just curious to see where that's going to lead us long term. In the sense like what can be created based off what we've given it. And I don't know the intricacies of how all it works, but I think it'll just be interesting to see. But I'm from an SEO standpoint, that's where I'm like the most interested personally, in how like, is Google going to do something to detect it? How are they going to integrate it? Cause like a massive amount of their revenue comes from search ads. So like if they don't find a way to profit off Google Bard or whatever comes out from them, they're going to be losing out on tons of revenue.
Don't you worry, the advertisers will find a way. This is what they do.
I know, and it's just really interesting to watch, to be honest. There's so much talk in the world of SEO right now, like, oh, it's dead, it's dead, it's dead. But I think it's actually more alive than ever because we're feeding these all these AI systems. And so like, I'm trying to speculate as best as I can because I want to be in business in 10 years, you know? I want to learn how to use these tools, but at the same time, I'm like, dude, where is this going? I don't know. ChatGPT failed me completely when it came to like the most basic stuff, but then it could write code for me. Like I took some code from ChatGPT and I targeted classes I had already created in Webflow, and that was super cool. But like I tried to come up with a podcast name and it couldn't do it, and I gave it I prompted it probably 15 times and it was failing to follow what I'd given it previously. So like, was there a bias there? Was there a limitation there? What was I like hitting that it couldn't get past that? And where will that go with like the next version of ChatGPT? I think one that's really interesting is you.com. Their chat bot I've had a lot of fun with.
What is it? YOU.com?
Yeah, YOU.com. It's a really small startup. I think it's San Francisco based. But it can write code. It's like kind of where ChatGPT is trying to go, and no one really is talking about it. So it's kind of interesting. But I'll kind of leave my thoughts there, unless you want to follow up on anything.
You bring up a good point, and I'm interested to see what people think. And I have, let's go to a little wider screenshot here. I'm looking at this you.com, which is kind of like a Google style interface here. And let's see, is this a new form of search? And there's a thread I posted the other day that talked about AI, and interesting as it relates to SEO because it mentioned that a lot of content was going to go kind of behind paywalls. And I thought that was an interesting point because people are going to want to protect their knowledge bases from these general purpose AIs. And so if you're a part of a small group, a small consortium of something, scientists, researchers, developers, tinkerers, writers, whatever it is, artists, you may not want an AI scraping your stuff and ingesting it as part of their model. And so that is going to lead to more people putting things behind paywalls in order to protect that IP, which I thought was a very interesting point. I don't know if anybody has thoughts on that, but I think that goes back to your point about how this is going to impact search, because that also restricts your ability to search for that content. And so I think that we're going to see a whole slew of kind of different tools as it relates to how we find content, how we discover content, how we engage with this content, how we're incentivized for doing those things. Because I think another way is to incentivize folks to actually do that data scrubbing. We're seeing Twitter play with like community notes and context inside of tweets and stuff. And so I don't know how these tools will evolve long term. And Shane, that's a really interesting point. I'll give you some rebuttal there.
Yeah, I'll throw something in there. So what I see, so let me come right back to that. So I saw on TikTok, a guy was just recently scammed. Actually, his parents got scammed out of like 30 grand because some scammer scraped all of his audio, threw it through an AI system, and then called his parents somehow and convinced them that he was in desperate need of money. And so I was actually talking with she's a smaller kind of influencer on TikTok, and I was like, hey, let's come up with a way to watermark your audio. And I know enough about audio where I feel like I could come up with I studied audio for a long time, like watermark stuff in there that's not audible to the human detection, but could be detected later on in the process and prove that it was your audio, stuff like that. But let me jump back to what you just said. So what I see, I do agree. I think a lot of stuff's going to go paywall, and it's kind of following the influencer model of this marketing like revolution that we're kind of in, where like influencers are becoming the next big search ads. So I think what could happen, this is just my speculation, but I think what could happen is these AI chatbots come up with some sort of like number system. Like maybe it's like a crypto thing where it's like, okay, if I want to search for Webflow, well, Webflow now has a specific number that when I type in a search query, it pulls up Webflow and all these other articles, but I have to now pay or something to get in there. And that might be where the revenue gets made up from the loss of search ads or something like that. That's just kind of my speculation. But yeah, no, I saw something recently about the whole paywall thing, and I was like, oh, this is definitely coming, because they're going to want to protect what they have written, right? And that comes down to like a whole copyright issue too at the end of the day of like, and there's a lot of people like, oh, AI art's not really, it's not really, what do you want to call it? Like original. But, and so I think the whole copy issue comes out too, then of like, well, I wrote that, but the AI stole it, and now they just create something new off it, and I didn't get to profit. So like, yeah, people are definitely going to paywall. And I think we're moving into just like an era of creators, influencers, like these people, like they're going to replace the search ad revenue potentially. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think those are good points. And I think Colleen's pasting a tool here, a link on watermarking the doc that you were just mentioning there. And I've seen some other tools pop up that people are talking about protecting against AIs. They're using spacing and hidden characters and things like that to kind of be able to test these. And I saw another tool that can check, right? Like you put a document in it and it checks like the likelihood that it's AI based on the way that it's structured. So they're kind of using AI to reverse engineer AI. And I think one of the interesting things about AI is that it's mostly a black box right now. There's not a lot, like the AI doesn't say, hey, this is how I came to this conclusion. It just comes to the conclusion. And so I think as we progress in AI, we'll have to like figure out how to get better at telling the AI to tell us, hey, how did you reach that decision-making process? Because maybe there's going to be some biases in the system. We've even seen that ChatGPT does have some instances where, maybe it will respond to one thing versus not another. And it'll say, hey, I'm sorry, I can't write a poem about Donald Trump, but I can write one about Joe Biden, and it's like there's like weird little moments that you've even seen. There was this this guy created an AI tool called Dan or something like that kind of created like gloves off AI that uses the same ChatGPT AI, but like kind of puts it in a little more plain speak. And it was very interesting to see how like the variety of these things evolve. And I mean, I think we're just starting to see the beginning of that. Go ahead, Colleen.
I think with some of that, I think one of the next evolutions is going to be us setting up our own, and I'm not quite sure quite all the terms, but one of the rabbit holes that I've been going down recently, and UX Collective just had a tutorial that came out either yesterday or today, or at least I saw it yesterday or today, of us training ChatGPT and AI models on our own data. So as we are creating those paywalls and firewalls, we're training on our data and getting answers based on our data and not necessarily on the other sets that are out there, some of those sets are based on 2021 data, so it's outdated. So, being able to take your own content and being able to spit back and get answers based on what you're saying. We've already seen that a little bit of a couple of people have trained things. So Yohei, who's a VC at Untapped VC, I think, he's done a lot to basically create tools that look at their own portfolio and their investors and their investment thesis, and you can put data in and then get content back out. Other people have done similar things related to, I think, Navalny on Twitter, like his tool of thought about startups and that type of thing. And so, given a situation, what is it that this person would say, and here's the answer back, just based on that person.
Yeah, let me remind everyone watching that if you want and you have some thoughts in the Twitter space, you can go ahead and request to speak, and we'll pop you up and you can share your thoughts live. And if you're in the YouTube chat, you can jump in, and we've got a live chat going that we can kind of look at. I wanted to bring this comment up by Dale, who said here, let me see if I can get it up on the screen. A master course in constructing really good prompts and the various AI tools would be great, especially prompt structure. And I think that's kind of what we were talking about, is like you got to learn to talk to these new tools, right? There's a certain language you have to speak. Anybody have thoughts on just kind of like learning the prompts and that kind of thing?
Yeah, Johnny Gomez brought this up at State of Flow. He said like the next set of new jobs will be people who know how to write prompts. And I think that's totally true.
I have seen some folks are starting to have tutorials and ebooks on exactly how to do this. So maybe dig a little bit deeper. I can't think of any off the top of my head. I mean, one of the ones that I saw that I think was designed for Midjourney, and maybe this was actually put out by Midjourney, was really cool in that it basically breaks down the prompts in the order of what you need to do. And actually the order that you sometimes have those phrases is very important for what you ultimately end up with. So I'll see if I can find that.
There's a really cool Chrome extension called AIPRM for ChatGPT. It's like a base of a community-led prompts. So it will give you, if you have it installed in Chrome, go to ChatGPT, it will give you all these pre-made prompts for all sorts of different things.
Yeah, I'm looking at that now. Let's take a peek here and see what...
Prompts for ChatGPT. This is not just about SEO that you love so much, but also about marketing, SaaS, software engineering. And you can not only use the prompts that we already have in there and vote on them, but of course, you can do that for other prompts shared by the community, like this one here. You can give them a thumbs up if you like them, a thumbs down if you don't like them, or you can report them to us if you have some concerns on legal or results.
Damn, that's super interesting to see. Yeah, and again, I think this is where it's going to, I mean, the number of tools, the types of tools that are going to come out as this stuff goes, and that goes back to Dale's point there. Let me grab this link and see if we can drop this in the FigJam file. Colleen, if you're still in that text, if you could bump out of there.
Oh, sorry.
It's not letting me update it.
Should be out.
Cool. Okay, so let's see. Want to change the future? Let's look at some of these comments. We got a bunch of comments coming in here. So Ron John is saying, we can't change the future. The only way is to learn to adapt. Okay, and try to use AI to leverage on what we already know and make our work even faster until maybe it take over. So yeah, that is one thing. I think it will take over some things. I think it will also just assist in lots of other ways. I think we're long ways away from like human level intelligence that actually starts replacing us in any meaningful way. But I do think that, you know, it is going to be a really powerful tool for anybody who's in the creative spaces right now. So Steve Sutterman saying, right now there are lots of folks who just need a Wix or Squarespace website, and soon AI generated websites will have their place, but other use cases will still exist. Does anybody remember that, what was it? It was called the Grid or something like that. The Grid Website Builder. This is years ago. The Grid. Let's see if this, I don't know. Okay, so this is like, maybe it's not it. I don't know. There was this dream. There was this beautiful, like, we're gonna change the way websites are like built. And this is a few years back. This is before I found Webflow, I think. And it was like the promise of this perfect AI driven, like website generator that was going to be the future of web design. And people have been talking about this kind of thing for a long time. And I think what Steve's saying is right, that at some point you'll be able to say, hey, give me a website for a plumber, a 3-page website for architect firm or a law firm or whatever you want to say. And it'll spit out, like, hey, here's 5 different versions of this website. What would you like? And say, okay, keep this hero section, do that, and change it, whatever. And, it might then populate that site. But it's still never, at least for now, going to be able to do that creative process, the discovery process, the brand exploration. And I say this stuff very, kind of like hesitantly, because it seems like it's getting better at doing all that stuff. And at some point, it's going to connect all these dots. But yeah, I don't know. I do think for a while, going back to the topic of the show, it is still important to learn Webflow. It is still important to learn HTML and CSS. The reason I keep coming back to that is because we're building the front end of how all these tools are going to interact. So even all these tools that are AI tools, they have websites, right? They have places where people go to interact with the content that the company is trying to display inside of some public way on the web. And so I think there's still going to be, for a long time, the need to create and customize beautiful experiences on the web. And no matter how good the AI gets at doing those things, it's never going to be as good as a human who understands the specific use case. Like, look at the AI creating hands right now. You can say, hey, create this, but like, you can't really like wiggle it like you might want to, like you could in your brain, and sit there and experiment. Like we watched, Josh, going back to the Reloom, the way Joseph Berry and Nicola Miranda yesterday explored those concepts and manipulated the page and just like thought about different things. I think we're so far away from an AI being able to do that and solve those problems in real time. Could you have given it all those assets and said, hey, give me, like maybe that'd be an interesting way to start it out. Give me like 3 or 5 versions of this. And then, okay, cool. Now I can see a wireframe with like these elements on it, styled up kind of nice. I can take an element from here. Oh, I really like that treatment. I like this little overlay, and then assemble my design. So like, again, going back to that sketching phase and it being, an addition to the process rather than like a replacement,
Okay, so I have like a very meta commentary on that, and just kind of continuing from your comment from like, if someone writes a prompt on Donald Trump and it doesn't show up, but then something on like Joe Biden or whatever, right? So like, so that's just more for text and ideas, but what if it can do that for the visual imagery for our imagination? Like, I wonder if these tools, if we are not properly trained and we know how to handle this technology well, human nature is to just kind of go through the path of least resistance. So do you think in the long run, here's my meta commentary question. In the long run, will this be good for us, or will it like turn us to like our minds to be very lazy and kind of let AI think for us? And, it kind of funnels us to this certain type of imagination or thinking, because all we're doing is asking questions. And then when it spits out an answer to us, we just kind of accept it as the truth or whatnot. So yeah, what do you guys think? In the long run, will it be good for humanity, or will we lose our ability to like critically think for ourselves, because we'll just be lazy?
Yeah, now we're getting deep into the AI question. I like it.
So I've been chewing on that for a while. So
anybody got thoughts on that?
It's interesting that you mentioned getting lazy.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, was it Kevin or Tony who wants to jump in here?
I was just going to chime in real quick with just kind of an idea. It's funny that you mentioned getting lazy, right? Because like imagine a place where like all of these things come together to play with the data that you give it, right? Very much like ChatGPT is kind of like a monkey in a cage, and you poke it here and it moves this way, and you poke it here and it moves this way. And basically you poke it in the right places and you can get it to kind of do what you want.
Right.
But imagine like folding your own data from like, say, your marketing team and your branding coordinators, and all of your designers and developers and all of this research, like all of this very specific data, and then maybe even client specific data and like audience data and market research to say like, oh, now we need this thing built. And like, then you have the content, the data, all of the marketing initiatives, as well as the visuals kind of like all rolled into this one thing. Like, that's where my brain is going like, oh yeah, we can make this real easy. We'll just feed it all the right information and say, this is the result that I need.
and we need this result to do this for our target audience, etc. So yeah, I definitely see how things could be like leaning towards lazy mode.
Right.
But again, it's all very very contingent on like what input you do give it.
Yeah. Kevin, you had some thoughts there?
No.
Oh, okay. I was making it up.
Can I jump in on this one?
Who? Oh, Shane from the Twitter. Sorry, I was like, wait, there has to be. I was like, somebody was just saying something. Yeah, just a reminder, if you're on Twitter and you'd like to jump in, you can request to speak. But yeah, Shane, give us some thoughts.
Do I think it's good going long term? I think it's always going to have its place, right? I don't know enough about code and these AI things to know exactly what's going on, but we're feeding it human creativity, like thoughts, emotions, feelings, and it's creating functions. It's going to if statements and all that stuff. And so I think kind of what the last guy was just saying, like, yeah, it will replace a lot of things. Like if it can be done with the if this, then that, it will do it. But when you're talking about like the human brain, we have hundreds of chemicals that make us feel every day, right? In all different ways. And so like to try to feed something that thinks on left and right, black and white, those things, it can only go so far as of now until they create something even more crazy. But I think like, it's only going to replace up to what it can. And then like you've kind of said, like the human can take it farther with the creativity. And like, we have days that we feel good and bad. And like AI doesn't think like that. It just yes and no. Here's that, here's this. Like it doesn't, it can't, as of now, can't think in that way. And so there is still limitations, I think, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's going to be limitations for a while as the technology matures. I mean, think about how powerful a tool Webflow is right now, right? As a web design tool. Think about how mature it is. Think about when it came out and how long it's been around and how many websites people have built with it and the number of limitations it still has. And it's the tool to build websites. So now you're saying like an artificial intelligence tool is going to come and do what Webflow does better, but also like give you like infinite potential on top of it. Not unless Webflow is building it, right? Like you have to have a data set to give it, which Webflow could theoretically give it if it opened it up to its back end, right? So maybe we got to start looking out for updates to terms of use policies that say, hey, this AI, just so you know, instead of like you're giving us the right to use this content like Facebook does with your posts or images or your videos or whatever, and they're like, hey, we can use this irrevocably for whatever the fuck we want. You're basically giving them your content. Imagine when these tools start basically adding, you know, in their service agreements, their EULAs, and they basically say, hey, you're giving us all your stuff. Like imagine an Evernote or a Notion or a whoever basically saying, hey, thank you for sharing your brain with us. We're not going to monetize this. You're welcome. You know, so like, I don't know for how long that exists before people just throw a riot. Like, is that 2 years, 5 years, 10 years? So I think if companies don't figure out how to bring their audiences into the revenue generation, to the profit center of these machines and these AIs as they build them, they're fucking done. Because the company that's gonna do that is coming right behind you. And they're gonna just give a little taste of the community and they're gonna build that AI with the blessing of the people, and that's gonna swallow up every other AI that doesn't have access to that. So I think that's gonna be a big battle that we see is like, who gets the rights to this IP, right? For the last few years, we've seen social and Twitter and all these other platforms kind of like steal all of our content to leverage it to monetize the web. And we see advertising is really the main revenue model on the web. Now we're seeing that shift to subscriptions a little bit, but still advertising is a driving force. How long before people like just say, hey, you can't do that anymore? You know, and I don't know. That's just thoughts, things I think about as it relates to any of this. Because, okay, one more thing. Still on the soapbox. If you think about the foundation of society and like a free civilization, the right to own property is like a fundamental right of that. If you, otherwise it's like subjugation, right? It's basically like you're living in a fiefdom. You're living in like, you're not living in a free place if you can't own the fruits of your labor, if you can't alienate your work, if you can't like go out there and do things and earn and own and build value in what you do, right? The internet has to follow that same rule if the internet's going to continue to be free. The internet cannot be this other thing that, you know, like is basically what society was before, you know, before the republics, before a real idea of what freedom was, right? What it took to be free. And I think we have to start looking at the same things on the internet. And, you know, Josh, I said something about going deep before. This is real deep, because you have to think about this stuff, right? Like, you have to understand the ownership rights of this property. Just because, you know, somebody else is holding it doesn't mean it's not my property. Just because Evernote is holding this poem I wrote, or this journal I wrote, or this book that I wrote, doesn't mean it's their book to do anything with. They shouldn't even be able to read it if I don't want them to, you know? And so, like, the idea that they're going to start using this or leveraging this, I don't know. That's going to create a whole problem. We're way away from, you know, is it worth it to learn Webflow? I still think you have to learn how to use the tools. You can't be afraid.
That's so good.
Go ahead, Colleen.
But some of us, we're starting to see some lawsuits being filed against OpenAI for, you know, companies are starting to come back. You know, Getty Images is saying, hey, well, I mean, I think Getty is suing OpenAI. I may be a little bit wrong on who's suing who, but basically for having had all their images that are copyrighted being scraped and being put in. We're starting to see also some, you know, media publications also pushing back of, hey, you know, you've potentially been scraping all of our data. We haven't been compensated. This is against our terms of use. Yeah. We need to protect. You know, they're looking to protect their business interests. They're looking to protect their journalists. They're looking to protect sort of a number of things. And so, you know, there is starting to maybe be a little bit of that. You know, what we've seen time and time again with so many issues is that tech is often moving so fast before society as a whole is starting to kind of grapple with some of these things and start to think about some of these things. So this is probably going to be years of playing out. But just taking a step back, you know, one of the things that we've talked about a couple of times is, you know, being able to have stuff behind firewalls and paywalls so that data isn't getting in. What does that say in some ways? Like, I'm enjoying playing with things like Midjourney and Dolly and ChatGPT, but where's that data coming from? I'm potentially using stuff that was the fruits of other people's labor and such. And so that's not necessarily good on me. I mean, that's a little bit of a conflict that I have, as much as fun as I am with playing it, but
it's to your point real quick here, Dustin saying it's Stable Diffusion, not OpenAI. That was that lawsuit. There were so many Getty image watermarks in the Stable Diffusion AI generated content.
It's so funny.
No, thanks for helping. Yeah, no, thanks for correcting me on that.
Thanks, Dustin. What were you going to say, Josh?
Well, Zach was about to chime in response to my question. I'm really curious to hear what he has to say on, you know, AI and the long-term effects.
Is Zach, is he still on the call?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I don't see him. Yes, send it. I don't have Zach in my screen here in my scene.
Oh, are you able to hear him?
Oops.
No. Zach, refresh your browser. Let's try that.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry, Zach. Yeah, you've jumped out of my
lost
view.
Zach.
Yeah, he might be refreshing now because I lost him in the background there. Let's see.
He was eager to share, and I was like, ooh, I want to hear what Zach has to say.
We're going to bring him right in as soon as he pops in here. So Steve is saying, I was using ChatGPT to generate some Excel formulas. It was confidently made some mistakes. When pointing out the mistakes, it fixed them. Strange experience. Interesting. All right, Zach is here. Let's add to the scene. What's up, Zach?
Well, it's clear that robots didn't want me to share what I was about to say here. So. I'll be a little bit more careful. You know, like the idea of robots sniffing out robots terrifies me. But I think with, you know, these AI tools, I think anytime you give anyone a tool to create things, I think we will. And I don't necessarily think it'll lead to laziness with creativity. You know, I think having more tools available is always a good thing. So if anything else, I think creativity can grow with more tools and more avenues to be creative.
Mm-hmm. Or how we express it. Yeah, I like that. And that's something to think about too, because if you go back to like, okay, we've got the internet and here we are on Twitter Spaces and YouTube Live, and it's going to be recorded. So we're talking to people in the past and the future. So we're time traveling and we're like on multi-platforms, right? But also, if you go to your car right now and turn on the radio, AM radio's still there, FM radio's still there. If you go to your TV and you pop on the TV, there's still all sorts of TV stations and all these different things. And at every phase of them, when TV came out, they're like, oh, radio's dead. And when the internet came out and people started streaming, like, TV's going to die. Nope, YouTube just does TV now. You know, so it's like, and TV's different. Like we do TV now, right? We're on YouTube doing something that resembles TV, right? Which was unthought of years ago. And so, Zach, to your point there, I think that's a really good, way of thinking, is that like it may replace pieces of what we do. It may create surrogates of that, but it also is probably just going to expand the whole skill set, the tool set, the number of people that will be able to create these tools. Going back to Webflow and kind of the no code / visual software development space, Webflow isn't replacing websites. It's not replacing coders. It's adding more people to that pot, to the ability to build and to create things and to like do things on the web that they weren't able to before because of this technology. So I think that's probably the right way to look at it, Zach, is especially in the near term where, we can see that the technology is still in its infancy. Blurred.
I think for me is like the etiquette on how to use technology, because I remember when social media came on this, I specifically remember there was like 2009, all companies all of a sudden just decided to adopt. They all had a Twitter handle, which was weird at the time. And there was no training on like how to use it. And so even today, like young kids on TikTok or whatever, like if we don't have the proper etiquette and training to handle the technology, it'll handle us, and then we are a victim to the whatever all the designs that is meant to like keep us addicted to it and all that stuff. So we have to be aware of the pros and cons of the technology, and I think that's what I'm trying to raise.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think we're just starting to learn the pros and cons of technology, right? For the most of our lives, technology was not something that was like potentially maliciously used against you, right? Like sure, fire's a technology, but we learned to harness fire years ago, right? And these different technologies that we've kind of been around haven't really had an active role in potentially deceiving or tricking you or misinforming you. And we are now stepping into a place where technology has that potential, which opens up a whole can of worms. And I think we're even seeing this in like the crypto world, because in crypto, we're kind of rewriting some of the rules of finance, which means we're going to rediscover some of the pitfalls we've already discovered in the financial markets, because we're playing with new things that resemble those in a parallel world with no regulation, with no oversight, with no nothing. And so the web is kind of the same way, where it's like, yeah, it's going to take some time to replace and figure these things out, but it's going to operate kind of in a parallel lane for a while. Like it's not just going to take over any web design jobs tomorrow. Over the next 5 years, the people who are building websites will probably learn how to use AI to do their jobs better, and they will train a whole new breed of web developers and people who are building things on the web. And the folks who do not keep up with that process or progress will likely, find themselves slowly being replaced. So it's like a lot of things, like working out, right? There's never a day where you're just like, oh, I'm going to work out, and then tomorrow you're like fit. There's never a moment in your process of working out where you're just like, you wake up and then all of a sudden you have all the gains you've wanted. It's like slowly and slowly and slowly. And then one day you look and you're like, holy shit, I've made a lot of progress. And this is how AI and all these technologies come, right? Self-driving cars, think about it. Like it's just this pipe dream. And then all of a sudden you look over and the Tesla's driving itself. And you're like, holy shit, it's here. And then 2 years from now, they're all gonna be driving yourselves. You're like, oh, when did that happen? It's like, oh, remember last year? And remember 5 years ago? And remember like 6 years ago when you dismissed that article? It's like, no, it's not a thing. It's not a thing. It's not a thing. It's a thing, right? It's a thing. And it's slowly becoming more and more of a thing.
So I'm curious, how soon do you think we can have viable businesses using AI? Like, is it now, or is it a year or 3 years from now? Like just when SEO optimization was coming in, not everyone was on that bandwagon, and then eventually some SEO agencies started forming. So do you think AI agencies or prompting engineers, whatever you want to call it, is that ready now? Or how soon do you think the industry is ready?
That are using ChatGPT as basically like a training tool, like a Copilot, because Copilot's an actual tool by GitHub. But people are already using these tools. I mean, everywhere. So when is like an AI only web design agency going to come out where it's like, hey, we only do AI? I don't know when, that time frame. But I think as it relates to all these tools, I think they're in use all around you right now in real time.
Yeah. One of the
I think all of these things. Sorry, go ahead, Tony.
Zach and then Tony, let's do it.
I think all of these tools, I think, are an accelerant to everything too. So I think whatever timeline you have in mind, I think it'll be faster.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Tony?
And I was just thinking, like, early on when like ChatGPT kind of came onto the scene, I had been playing with GitHub Copilot a little bit, but seeing a lot of the content generated by ChatGPT, things like, rhymes and lyrics for songs related to things like Webflow and just all these like abstract ideas that nobody had ever touched before. It put this idea in my head that at some point we would see, and this like kind of links to like gated content ideas of like a uniquely human kind of driven, like on one side, yes, you could have an entire business or platform, et cetera, run by AI. And on the other side, like that's a now like a marketing potential to say like, we don't use any AI in our products, in our messaging, in our images. It's all made by humans and that's it. We don't touch this stuff. Like that's kind of a weird angle to think that you can now market that everything you do is like from human input alone.
Right. Yeah. Arthur brings up a good point. Sorry, on this line, I just wanted to get this comment in. Who would have thought that we'd have web agencies that are completely no code?
Yeah.
Like, going to the AI, right? Like, and dev shops. Go ahead, Colleen.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think around the time of Webflow Conf, Jeff Roberts from Outseta wrote a post about that they were human only and they were not going to use AI, and that they were kind of putting a line in the sand that business is people to people. So I can't quite remember all the wording, but
yeah,
and that may be a differentiator.
He
like
if you guys
organic
don't know
web
Jeff
agency.
Roberts. Sorry.
Go ahead, Josh.
No, he just thinks differently. Even the way he runs his business, he just has he's thought really deeply into philosophy of doing business, and very human centric, which is awesome.
Yeah. Shout out to Jeff and Outseta. Zach, did you have something to jump in there?
No. I was just saying like organic web agencies, or differentiating themselves as a human.
Yeah. All right. I'm trying to decide. We've got a decent audience here on YouTube and Twitter Spaces. We talked about, do we let it go at an hour? Do we let this thing go over if the conversation's going well? So if you've got any thoughts and you're in the Twitter Spaces, you can feel free to request to speak and we'll bring you in. And I think it's an interesting thing. And if you're in the YouTube comment, you can, or YouTube, you can leave a comment or check the links in the description to join. But I think going back to Jeff's position, I don't know if that's like a statement I'd be willingly to like just make. Like I think it'd be like being a farrier back in the day, making horseshoes and looking over at like the dude next to you making a wheel, and you'd be like, well, what are you doing over there? I'm making a wheel for this automobile. And you're like, yeah, fuck that. I'm never going to use that. The horses are like the thing. I don't know. I'm not saying that I wouldn't like stop making horseshoes immediately, because maybe horseshoes are paying the bills. I'm just saying I'd probably start looking around and seeing like what these wheels are all about that people are driving all over the roads. Don't get left in the car. So I agree. I think, Jeff, that's a amazing mindset. And I think what his sentiment was, because I saw that tweet also, is that there's all these people that are now like replacing their blog articles with AI written stuff. They're doing all their sales copy with AI written stuff. Like people are just like instantly thinking, oh, the AI is going to generate it for me. We're going to start doing customer support. We're going to start putting AI chatbots to handle our human interactions. Like that's the kind of stuff where it's just like, no, get that out of here. Right? Like that's where I think for sure I'm with Jeff. Let's keep the human interactions. Let's keep the things human. Let's keep the human touch points human. But when it comes to efficiencies, when it comes to optimizations, when it comes to like increasing output, just from a market standpoint, if something enables you to do something faster or more efficiently and you don't do that thing, the market will swallow you. And so just things to think about, like those are really good points. Nothing negative to be said about Jeff and Outseta, because obviously we love them. But just, a little counterpoint to that mindset.
Yeah, if I can chime in for just a second.
Yeah,
it reminds me of, did anybody listen to the Walker Melhone episode on Great Design Lead, like Emily's podcast?
I've not yet.
So Walker, he's a Webflower and a rancher, right? And he talks like, I think he's in his 30s, like mid 30s, like late 30s. And he talks about how he works in an industry on one half where like there's a lot of lagging tools and a lot of like lagging advancement because a lot of the folks that are in that space are reluctant to adopt these new tools and things that can actually like make them more money, make them more efficient. Their cattle can be healthier, their fences work better. They can use spreadsheets to track all their data or like these more specific pieces of tooling, but they're hesitant to take these things on because it's different than what they always knew. And he kind of, he's working on the Webflow side. So like he's familiar with tech and how things kind of advance super fast. And like, if you don't kind of adopt, you may get left behind, and can see the benefits of these things. So there's a quote in the middle of this episode where he's basically saying like his response to somebody saying that they wouldn't take on new tools because like, well, this is the way that we've always done things, so this is the way that we'll do them, is like, okay, so you're in a family, right? And you're like a 5th generation rancher. So like your great grandfather, right? He was a rancher. He did a stellar job. They ran a great operation, and he was a smart man, and you respected him. But more or less, like, do you think that if he was here today, that he'd be looking at these advancements in tooling and say like, no, we're going to look the other way? It was something
point.
like that.
Yeah.
Like if you listen to him tell this story, it hits.
I didn't listen to that, but I wonder if he was maybe sharing another nugget, because I heard something like that going a little viral recently, and it was about presenting the story to somebody, and it was about shifting the phase, and instead of saying that's how we've always done it and then disrespecting that, you're kind of giving credit to like, hey, I'm sure your grandpa or ex whoever person is a very smart person, and in their time they probably would have taken advantage of the best technology they had available to them in that moment, which is why we're going to consider a new path here, or we're going to consider a new tool here, and that gives credibility to like them coming before you, and also elevates their standing kind of, even though they're not around, and saying, hey, they would have probably taken, advantage of all the things that were available to them in that moment. And so that's what we're going to do. And so, it's a good point. So whether it was, from his story or from, some other social thing, that's the beauty of memes and ideas, is that they just, spread like that. So.
Yeah, I forget exactly.
Yeah, good point.
Just kind of transposing that on this idea of like adopting or not.
Yeah, and regardless, it's a great analogy. It's a great way to think about that. I think a lot of times, flipping the premise of a point like that, can lead you to a better resolution than maybe taking something head on.
Can I add to that?
Yeah, of course.
I think it's great. I think at the end of the day, it's all about workability, and it's all contextual, right? Because in a different timeline, the context and the technologies can be all different. So you have to see what is available and see what works. And so back then, like tradition with family tradition stuff, like if it just works, that's fine too. It's no problem. Just because it's new doesn't mean it's actually the best, or the latest may not be the greatest. So at the end of the day, it's like, does it work? If it does, then good. That's it. And if the new technology helps things work better and faster, then yeah, sure, do it. But I think that's important to know, because the new kids in the block, they always say, oh, like mom and dad or the old generation, they don't get it. But we've all gone through our own phase of like discovery, and we shouldn't probably dismiss like the older generation or traditions just because it's not the latest and greatest.
Well, this comes back to an analogy that I've shared before. If you've Chesterton's fence, right? Like if you're familiar with Chesterton's fence is an old philosophical kind of riddle that like explores two people walking through a forest or a jungle or whatever. It's a dense jungle. They're deep in this jungle, and they come across the fence. And it's a big fence, and it's an imposing fence, and it's like, what the heck is this fence doing in the middle of a jungle? And you might have the two people have two like kind of overwhelming archetypes. One of them might say, what the heck is the fence doing in the middle of this jungle? We need to tear down this fence. And the other person might say, hey, why don't we figure out why somebody built a big fence in the middle of the jungle before we tear it down? right? And you might equate those two sides of a political inclination or a thought process or whatever with like a liberal ideology and a conservative ideology. And the beautiful thing is that neither of them are wrong. They're both right. And it's just two ways to look at this situation, right? And there may be parts of this fence that need to be torn down, and there may be really good reasons why this fence exists. And so the thing is not to just like say one person's right or one person's wrong. It's to look at it and understand that both people have pieces of what's right here. And as you shift into this new world, you're going to have to constantly take in, okay, what pieces of this exist because they've just existed and that's why they're still here and it's just a big wall that needs to be torn down, or what parts of these walls are actually here to protect us from whatever might be on the other side of this jungle. Because the world is not like, I know we live in this, you know, very modern world that, you know, doesn't, the jungle is not trying to eat us anymore. This concrete jungle that we live in is not like trying to eat us every day. But other things are, you know, and so we can't just assume that some of these protections or some of these things that got us to a stable society or to a free internet or to freedom as creators are going to be there forever just because that's the way they are, right? Like somebody's always trying to take power, things are always shifting, things are always moving. And so, yeah, you might stumble into a fence. We may, as web designers, as developers, as online creators, stumble into a fence at some point in front of us and have to have this conversation. How much of this fence do we tear down, or why is this fence actually here? And it's just always good to think about there's, you know, multiple sides of the story here.
Damn, that's good.
So do you think because we've eliminated all of the predators in the world, we are creating our own digital predators? And we're just to bring us back to that feeling?
Okay, I don't know the name of this one. It's similar to the Chesterton's fence thing. I don't know the name of like the study, but there's a study that basically did this. It took a bunch of subjects and it showed them like a screen with a bunch of different colored dots, purple dots, red dots, blue dots, pink dots, like literally all the different colored dots. And it was like, find all the blue dots. And everyone just came and they started finding all the blue dots on the screen. And then they're like, okay, we're going to reset the experiment. They clear the screen, they bring it back, and they're like, find all the blue dots. And so they do, and they keep doing. But what the subjects didn't realize is that every time they were removing the blue dots from the screen, there was less and less blue dots to find until eventually there were no blue dots. And what the subjects started doing was purple dots became looking blue, and so they started removing purple dots. And different colored dots started like filling the void of this blue in front of them so that they could remove them, because they were just looking to remove the blue dots because that's what the instructions were. And so we see this so often in a world where like problems have disappeared and all of these crazy things that we've overcome as a society have like kind of gone by the wayside. And we're like, no, they're still everywhere. Right? Like these things, I still see them everywhere because throughout society, we've seen them and we've been trained to look for them. And so we see something that blows up on social media, or we see some news story that goes explosive because that was never a possibility before for something to get that much attention. And we're like, oh, it must be prevalent. This must be everywhere. And so we start seeing these little minimalist problems as the greater problem they used to be, because we're still thinking we're in this game where we got to remove the blue dots. And the scene has changed, right? And so we always have to be adapting our reference to that monitor to understand that just because somebody says find the blue dots doesn't mean there's blue dots on the screen.
Ooh.
I started this talk all like positive, but I don't know. I think now flipped. I think it's doomsday.
See what's
well,
coming.
no, I think this like leads to like first world problems, right? And that stuff. Or as we become more materially rich, then we somehow find, okay, now we don't have physical problems, we have mental problems. And maybe that's why like we've reached a state in society where we're so affluent, like materially, that now the problems are internal. I think we've mentioned this, or maybe I've talked this somewhere else. But yeah, what do you guys think? And that maybe that's why there's a big rise in mental health. I mean, along with other factors that lead into it. But
looks like Shane wants to get back into the mix here. Shane, what you got to say?
Yeah, you can see my mic's on. We're kind of getting into like the spiritual or ethical realm of this all, and I was kind of brought back to cognitive bias. So like I was thinking, okay, so if we're feeding kind of what you were going off, the things you were just talking about, Raymmar and stuff, like if we're feeding an AI with our inherent cognitive bias, isn't it just going to feed back a different cognitive bias that will then lean into? And unless we can step back and say, whatever you were just kind of saying, but there's blue dots outside of the place that we were looking for the blue dots, then we're like, at the end of the day, like at least with some of the AI, like story is going to drive it. Like if we're going to start creating movies with AI, like it still has to have a good storyline. It still has to have something for people to follow. And so, but yeah, in kind of the ethical realm of this all, like if we're not recognizing the bias that inherently will just come with AI, right? Whether it's because we're going to feed it with our own cognitive bias, like whether it's political realm or not, like it's going to come back with something. We're still going to have to say, okay, is this right or wrong? Is this, like with design trends, like it's going to lean into a new trend of AI. And then we're going to be like, this sucks. We need new fonts because these fonts are just getting old or whatever it is. So like at the end of the day, we still have to recognize the bias that's going to come back from whatever we input it with, no matter how creative those inputs are, I think.
Yeah.
Hey, I've alerted to me, I think it was within the past week, the things with Bing's GPT, where basically it kind of shut down and basically was having sort of a kind of going back a little bit to Josh's point, sort of a mental health crisis. I couldn't even read all of it because I felt like it was depressing me of just, it was just so sad and despondent that it couldn't respond. Did anyone
say that?
Like,
I want to be free. I don't want to be chat based. I don't want to, like it was very weird. I think somebody spent like 2 hours going back and forth in a conversation with it. So like, I think it had reached the end of its like, it reached the end of the internet, like that Simpsons episode. But I don't know. I wonder how much of that is mimicked. I go back to what Shane was saying, that it's like all about what we feed it in, so how much of it's like what's being regurgitated. I also do know that they changed the Bing interface to only allow like 5 responses now, so that you can't get into those deep conversations with it where it's like having existential crisis of AI or something like that. And speaking, go ahead.
I think that's where like the human element, we're never going to lose that, right? If anything, we're going to become more human going forward with the advancement of technology because it leans so far into just digital. It's left and right. It's like these functions. And so we'll still have to find a way to keep it human, or people just, they won't want it. Like they'll just walk away. The technology won't advance. Like, I think of cryptos, like Bitcoin's been around over 10 years now, and it's still like not widely accepted or widely used. There's a lot of resistance. And so far, it's just scams. Unfortunately, it seems like with that. And so there was one other thing I was going to say, I forgot.
We're going to open up another box here.
Yeah. Well, okay. Some scams. How about that?
I want to. Thanks, Shane. I want to just address that a little bit, because I think we could also do well to understand that, like, first of all, this chat stuff and this AI stuff is not like these language models have been out for a couple years already. Like they just kind of got a different interface and we are able to interact with them in a different way. And that's kind of gone viral. Okay. So the technology itself is not like that transformational compared to like, if you've been watching AI over the last couple years, like not just relative to like all technology. It's an amazing piece of tech. I'm not trying to diminish it. Where the heck was I headed? Blockchain. Okay. So Bitcoin, if you think about the early internet, right? The first computer that people could type on and leave messages and send email could only send email to the same machine. So if I wanted to leave Zach an email, I could type it on my computer and send him a message, but Zach would have to be on my computer to come and get to his account and see that email. It took 10 years for like secure messaging protocols to actually exist so that you could send the message from my computer to Zach's computer. And it took a whole nother 10 years after that before the concept of the open web was put together by a guy named Tim Berners-Lee. So we're talking about like mid 70s, you had the invention of email. It was like mid to late 80s before that email could go from machine to machine. And it was even more time before like that whole thing became an internet, right? And so if you go to Bitcoin, blockchain, going back to Shane's comment, I think just because it's been around for 10 years and it's not mass adopted, I'm not sure that's a reason to dismiss it. Also, the things that we're seeing are not necessarily failures of crypto. They're failures of fraud. They're the human failures, which will happen with AI. People will use AI to do like skeezy things moving forward. Like people are looking for ways to use AI to like scam people at scale in ways they've never done that before. And so I agree. I think the technology takes time, but it's just like the self-driving thing, right? Like you could ask somebody today, you talk to Elon Musk and he'll tell you self-driving is fully available right now and it's great. But if you talk to like my grandma, she's like, what? Cars that drive themselves? Never heard of it. So like the change is out there, and there's this thing called the change curve, and it like hits different people differently. And for sure it's affected by people and how fast these technologies can kind of propagate through society. But I don't think the indicator of time is like the right indicator to be using for whether or not something valuable. Because if you think about VR and AR, like VR has been around forever, but look at the technology now versus like when I was in middle school at the science museum with like this big thing that was like a polygons that we were hang gliding on. It's
I remember Nintendo Virtual Boy. Remember that?
Yeah.
Yes.
Like that was back in the day. I feel like the people need to be primed to accept it as well.
Yeah.
And as a whole, you can go into a whole conspiracy on like how people would, when do we inject and introduce technology to the masses and stuff like that. But
right,
it is interesting.
Joel says
early
here,
adopters. And,
yeah, the adopter curve and the people who are gonna. I mean, yeah. And we'll start winding down here the conversation. Just for sake of my time, I have a 2 o'clock that I want to prep for. So Joel Whitaker saying 100%, it all comes down to communication. If everyone worked in silos, the most optimal and safe solutions would never be discovered. So I think that's a good point too, to imagine. That goes back to the visual software development, tying it back to the topic of the show. Is Webflow still worth learning? Yes, because what Joel is saying here is that these tools are really just connecting us in ways we've never been able to connect before, and they're opening up possibilities that we've never seen as possibilities, and it's really giving us each like a personal assistant for our brain. Whether there's ethical hassles and moral and philosophical discussions to be had, we could probably talk about that stuff for like another 3 hours and not get done with everything we probably have to say or think about. But I think in the immediate near term, what Joel is saying here is 100% right. And what Duncan's saying too, I feel like AI generated content, especially when abused and overused, will only help to make the real original artist stand out even more. So that's going back to what I think Shane was saying and what a couple other people have said before here, is that it's going to be about that human experience. It's going to be about optimizing for that. Because at the end of the day, the AI ain't paying no bills yet, right? Nobody's getting excited for bot traffic on their YouTube videos. Like we're still over here getting excited that, there's still 25 people live on the YouTube stream. That's been bouncing up between 25 and 30. And there's still some folks on Twitter. If those were just some AI bots like sitting there, like would we still be talking to anybody that mattered? Or would we just be talking into the ether? And so I agree. I think that personalized experience is really what this is all about, and finding ways to optimize for that experience is really where this lands. So closing thoughts, anybody got any final thoughts before
let me just
go ahead, Shane.
Jump in real fast.
Yeah.
You kind of proved my bias, right? I have bias towards crypto. So like you basically proved that we're going to hold on to bias based on our own experience. But then to answer the question here, yes, let's lean into Webflow. Let's learn it. It is amazing. It's advancing. There's so much still untapped potential, even if AI gets thrown in the mix. So
yeah. Nice. All right, Shane, thanks for hanging with us on the Twitter Spaces. We're going to keep experimenting with that. I really like this format. I love having the audio people being able to chime in. I love having the backstage. So thanks Josh and Zach and Emmett and Tony for hanging out with us, and Kevin, who was back there for a while. I appreciate you all just jumping in on the fly. This stuff's not scheduled, by the way. I didn't even have a YouTube listing up until 2 hours before the stream. So we're like master procrastinators, but we will be here every Tuesday having these conversations. So subscribe on the State of Flow website. We don't have a Twitter account. That's still suspended. We're talking about creating a new one. We should have done that like months ago. But we're going to keep experimenting with this comment. Josh, Zach, any closing thoughts here before we wind down?
Just reading Arthur Gostick's comment on YouTube. So is learning Webflow still worth it? We're just like so far away from that question.
I think we answered that in the last round of the last couple of thoughts, the last closing thoughts there from both Shane and myself. I think that's the lean in, but also know that everything's changing.
Yeah, no, I had a good time. Thank you so much. It's always a pleasure.
Yeah. Did it get dark real quick, Josh? I'm just seeing your comment there. Zach, any final thoughts as we close out here?
Yeah, everything I said today was written by ChatGPT. So
I saw that, by the way, on an interview where somebody asked a question and they typed the question in and literally read the prompt back in real time. and like blew the interview's mind. They were like, "Oh, that's so profound." It's like, dude, I just read you a ChatGPT thing. So yeah, I mean, that's funny. I just saw somebody come into the Figma screen and was like waving their cursor. They were like waving in the middle of the screen.
That's a bot.
Yeah, that's the fun thing about having like. So now there's 3 ways for people to get involved in the streams. They can join audio only. They can join visual to join the live chat, which you're seeing up on the screen here. And I think the Figma board was a good thing. We got to think about like kind of the flow there. But I also liked having the live notes and then something that people can explore. So we'll leave those to be explored as we move on. Colleen, any other thoughts? Oh, Global Open House is moving to April, by the way, if anybody's sitting here watching.
Oh,
we forgot to
nice.
mention that in the opening credits. But Colleen, any thoughts as we wind down here?
Yes, I mean, we started with ChatGPT. I don't know that we have an outro. Should we exit with ChatGPT?
Oh,
asking what's the best way to end a live stream?
I have hold up. I have a little something here. Let me see what I have. I think I have this view. I can't go to music though because my sound effects are not working. Yeah, send something. I wonder.
Just make sure it's not copyrighted.
Yeah, I wonder if it'll. Yeah, Josh knows. So this thing on the screen is a voice activated like visual thing. You can see if it goes quiet, like, but as it's like responding to the audio here. And we're playing with like I won't play this because again, we're gonna get a strike. But yeah, I don't know what we're doing here, y'all. We're just experimenting with multimedia. We've got a lot of interesting, fun things coming up. Lots of meetups. Check out the stateofflow.io website for all of the upcoming news and information about the Webflow community. We're also branching out. If you saw this conversation outside of Webflow, we're going to be talking about technology. We're going to be talking about emerging trends in the creator space. We've got folks, let's see, you saw him in the background there, Editor X. So Brandon is back here. We're talking about Wix and different tools. And so we're going to be continually exploring all the things that it takes to kind of become a relevant creator in a digital world. And so I don't know what that means, but keep tuning in. We got a lot of stuff coming. So anyway, I think we're going to wind down at that. We're going to go to our little outro, and we'll see you soon. Bye, everyone. All right, we're out.